Hi, and welcome to Cramer on Demand, live. My name is Ashley, and I'm a producer over here at Cramer. With the current state of our world, everyone has transformed the way that they work. Many of you, our clients, have been asking, how do we keep audiences engaged online? Our team here came together and created this series called Cramer on Demand to help you navigate virtual solutions. We are hoping with this live session, you can get your questions answered from the Cramer experts. So without further ado, let me introduce them. Rich Sturcio, the president of Cramer, Angel Micarelli, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Content, and Vinny Higgins, Director of Event Technology. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you. I personally have been doing live events for over 30 years, which is starting to feel unfortunate, but still over 30 years. And we've been doing virtual events for at least 12 to 15 years. We were all trying to remember when we did our first one, but we haven't got there. And I think we're really at an unprecedented time in the world, and certainly with events at this point. So we've spent the past 6 weeks curating platforms, looking at technology, and really trying to come up and sort out what are the best technologies for each application. And it really has been fascinating.
Hi, I'm Angel Micarelli, and as Ashley said, I lead up the strategy and content teams. And what's been really interesting to me at this time is helping clients who may have been hesitant about moving to virtual events understand that a lot of the foundational elements are still there. So that strategy and the content that you would have done for a live event still applies to the virtual event. And then they feel better about it. And when they know that we have their back on the platforms, they feel better about it, which is where Vinny comes in.
How's it going? I'm Vinny Higgins, Director of Event Technology here at Cramer, and I work closely with Rich and Angel and the creative team to figure out how to get the content that they've created for the event and get it onto the platform successfully. Our job, my team's job, is to stay on top of all the latest and greatest technologies out there and understand fully, everything they can do and how we can use all those tools to help you have a successful event.
Great. And guys, before we begin, we want to hear from you guys at home. So what types of meetings are you looking to take virtual? Vinny, can you push that poll for me? So within this, you can check all that apply.
Please, if you haven't seen the question window, please start firing your questions away. We'd love to hear anything that you have to say. We're hopefully prepared to answer almost everything. So
and that Q&A widget is at the bottom of your screen. Definitely vote or ask questions, and you can upvote those questions as well.
Awesome. So while the poll responses and Q&A stuff comes in, we're going to start with the first question. So to all of you, where do I start? I know I need a virtual solution. So what's next?
So I think we see a lot of people who are, going out, realizing they have to do a virtual event and immediately run out for platforms. What platform are I going to use? And that's fine. It's not really the best way to start. I mean, we like to start with really what is the strategy? What do you want to accomplish? What resources do you have available? And then sort of back into what results do you want and go from there.
Awesome. Great. And then the next question I have for you guys is what differentiates our offerings from what people can get utilizing Zoom or WebEx or one of those kind of platforms?
So, I'll start, everybody jump in, but I think Zoom and WebEx have their place in this virtual world as they do here. This is a Zoom webinar, and for this type of event, we feel it's the right thing. Interactivity with a panel, there's no on-demand content needed. It's a short duration, it's inexpensive, and it's fast. But when you go to a company like a Cramer or any agency, we start really to craft a whole program. So we start again, what is the strategy? Then there's content development. Angel, maybe you want to touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about it, it's almost like PowerPoint lets anybody do a PowerPoint, but the production values of the PowerPoint are different. So it's the same thing with any kind of an event. Anyone can do a virtual event, but to do an event that stands out online takes a higher level of thought and production. And it's also going to become more important as more events do go online, because the bar is going to get raised higher and higher.
Absolutely. And I think, Vinny, we can end this poll because I think everyone's responses are in. So you guys can kind of see where everyone lands on the kinds of events that they're replacing virtual with. And it looks like here, over half of us are trying to move the virtual event user conference. So, I mean, I think that's pretty typical to what we're seeing right now. How about, do you guys feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, right? Everything's moving virtual, or at least into some sort of hybrid mode. So why don't we take that question first, and we can sort of deal with that, and then we can go back to some of these others. So I think that the future of virtual and hybrid events is going to change by what the event is and willingness to travel. I think our guess is that in the near future, obviously, if you take a user conference, a smaller percentage of people will be willing to travel for that. And I think once there is it's actually kind of combine a couple of questions here. Once there is an actual physical event, I think it'll be a lot easier to monetize an online event when there's sort of an alternative. I think, we're sort of predicting that in the more internal meetings and sales meetings, we might see things start to happen regionally first in sort of smaller groups with a virtual component to reach people who can't get together. I do feel like people want to get together soon because it just, I think I'm probably the only one I'm a certified loner and I'm still going nuts. I do see that each event will have sort of a different composition of virtual and live. And I think things are going to start off small, but I think we will have a bunch of people getting together and doing things. I'm not sure that answered that question completely because I'd have to run through each type of event, but that's sort of the trend I'm seeing. Anybody have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think, as we go to that trend of hybrid events, I think we're going to find that it opens up a whole new territory, and we're actually going to like it, that we'll have smaller live events that are more intimate, but we'll still be able to reach a broad audience by bringing them in virtually.
Awesome. And there's another question here that says, are there any new tools or capabilities you're seeing that stands out from the typical platform offerings, new trends like technology or audience engagement?
So a couple things that I have been really taken with lately is there's a couple of platforms where you can move into live breakout sessions. So where you would typically be in a general session with something streaming, you can then move into a smaller session within that same platform, and then into another session where now you have something that's more akin to a Zoom meeting where you can share functionality. You can have, I like to call them like table discussions. You can look for that in Bizzabo is one. There's another one called Shindig, which is seems to be a little more educationally oriented, but it's kind of cool. So I think those are a couple things that you're really seeing that are going to change things a bit, where we can start to do that. And also there is a new technology out called Hopin that we find very interesting because it's really focused on networking. It seems, again, each one of these doesn't seem quite right for everything, but that's where I think you got to start to look at your offering and get a strategy about what's important.
Yeah, Rich, I think you're spot on. I think the big question we always get is how do we recreate that networking, aspect of a live event? And in the past, with a lot of these virtual platforms, it was possible to a certain extent with chat rooms and networking rooms. But now, as you mentioned, a lot of these newer platforms and even some of the legacy platforms are adding some of these very cool ways to participate in kind of like video networking, where you're in small groups, small roundtables on video, having those kind of discussions that you would at a live event.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. With live events, we were really getting more into purposeful networking, really helping people make the right matches and find the right people. I think we'll see that more and more with the virtual events, because we have more of an ability to match people up, and also because we want to make sure that those connections are worth their while.
Yeah, and Angel, there are a lot of questions coming in about this networking aspect as being the biggest thing missing from these events, right? Because in person, you have that connection right away. So are there any ideas to help accommodate those networking needs, like that can be a part of that event?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one or two off the top of my head, and Rich, I know you do as well. But when we come to that purposeful networking, for example, if we have people come together around a common interest in a breakout room, that's that natural birds of a feather. If we have it come around a particular keynote speaker where only a certain number of people are invited in on that discussion, well, we've created an exclusive group that are sharing something together that other people aren't, and that gives them a certain connection. So part of it is being able to provide more intimate and exclusive networking opportunities so people can make stronger connections.
I also think on the networking thing that we don't always have to turn to one solution for that. It's kind of, we're at that time sort of we have to start thinking differently. So I don't think there's anything wrong if, for example, you have a company that just has a webcasting platform and that's how your content is going to go out. There is nothing to say that can't be followed up by a series of phone calls right after that people belong to a group, whether it's a Zoom or a WebEx or a Skype or whatever the call is, where there's smaller groups that are then asked to immediately start to interact with what was just discussed in the bigger webcast. I think, we have to sort of stretch ourselves that what we've seen, in all honesty, is that there's not one platform that you roll out and you go, oh, that's it, solves everything. We got, some that solve most of it, some that solve some of it. And that networking issue is continually the hardest thing to solve. And I wouldn't be afraid of jumping in and out of technologies if that's what it takes to get you what you need.
Yeah, and you just made a really good point, Rich. It's part of a communications continuum as well. So you don't have to think about it as only one point in time, and actually you shouldn't, that you should be continuing the communications long after the event.
And there's actually a great follow-up question to this. So aside from those networking in-person aspects, how do we combat that what events offer is largely, hands-on, in-person, sensory experiences? So how do we keep that wow moment virtually?
Well, let's just say, I think all of us that do live events, you really can't quite do it. Where there's only attempts at it. So I think you can also, one thing that we've been sort of exploring with, it's kind of interesting, is that certain things actually do actually okay live. Like, for example, we've been playing around with magicians. I mean, I can't think of a wow moment with a specific product, but you can add. Right now, entertainers are pretty available, and we've been able to negotiate some really, really attractive pricing. So when you start to want to make something important, maybe you can have somebody famous show up on your site and introduce the product. Things like that are where you have to start thinking out of the box a little, and that's going to be, I understand, a short-term solution, because once everybody's back out there and Hollywood's going again, people are gonna go out. But things like that are a thing that you can consider. Certain acts and certain talent really do work okay as a wow moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, another question that kind of is in this same realm is, recognizing people. So that awards component, those sales awards. So how do you recognize recipients without feeling disjointed or disconnected? That's a tough one.
Yeah, yeah. It falls into that same kind of category, but again, the virtual events in a lot of ways gives us a better platform because you can do an interesting video to recognize people, and this is something that your audience will be predisposed to watch because it's visual. You can do a follow-on communication about it, so it's we have to treat it in the same way that we treat other broadcast elements, thinking about, does it make good TV?
And so a couple things you can do, and we've been challenged with this a couple of times, is with the recognition, you really got to kind of weed it down. That's the hardest part about it. So you can send out, first of all, there's nothing that says that you can't send a package directly to someone's house, by the way, which is if you're really truly doing recognition and you can boil it down to a certain number of people that are getting a package that makes them a little more engaged, that's something I would recommend you doing. For recognition, a lot of these awards we do, you will have 200 people receiving something and they march on, and obviously that makes for terrible TV. But if you get it down to 3 or 4 or 5 important winners, it's pretty easy right now to put together a little video just with iPhone footage congratulating them with their family members or their bosses. So you can make a little package for each of the big winners. And that's really a nice way, and I think feels very personal and shows that you've gone the extra mile. But a lot of it does have to do with weeding it down. I can't thank 200 people for their, just achieving quota. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. I think too, Angel, what you touched upon earlier was, you can create videos too to recognize people. And that kind of goes into this next question about how can we produce the video on demand sessions that I've been holding in a physical event. So those videos that you just talked about could be a session. How do they create that so it doesn't feel disjointed?
Yeah, I'll actually let Rich and Vinny talk about that. We have ways to help people do videos virtually if they need to in a way that's more professional. We have our own broadcast studio, of course, to do video. Rich, I'll let you jump in there.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, so if you're producing breakout content, is that did I get the question right, Ashley?
Video on demand session. So I think that could be general session, breakout.
Yep. Okay, so I got it. So a couple of things. First of all, for simple, I want to give my breakout session. Here are my slides. Here's my face. You can actually record those right in PowerPoint as it stands today. I think it's 2016 or higher will allow you to do that. Don't quote me on that. It might be one more than that, but it's certainly possible. And then there's 2 or 3 other programs that will allow you to do that, where you can present, record your video and audio and your slides all at the same time. So that's one solution. The other thing is you can also, don't be afraid of post-production. I mean, any content that you give a company like us, we have editors working from home remotely. So we are editing all the time, putting those things together. And if you think about, it's actually an example I've been using this week. For anybody who saw Saturday Night Live on Saturday, I mean, there were some hits and misses, but overall, it sort of really opens your mind to, wow, we can really do quite a bit from home if we're willing to add a little post-production elements to it and play it back. So I think you can come up with some pretty good content if you put your minds to it and on how you want to get it and how you want to deliver it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's how we created the Cramer on Demand series too, right? Everyone's at home and we're able to put in those post-production elements to really elevate the production level. So I think that, I know that it may sound limiting to be right next to your laptop and this is kind of your tool, but there's so many great things you can do with it. And that's where we can help.
Yeah, and Ashley, to that point too, I think as we're working with our clients, thinking through how they can create content while everyone is remote, there's other things you need to take into consideration, like hardware, little things that you might not think about. And we've actually been working with our clients, trying to put together what we call a webcast in the box kit when we're able to. Obviously, there's kind of a run on some of this gear right now, but we have created a list of best practices and like gear recommendations, such as, a Yeti mic, for example. So this is an easy tool that you can purchase that really helps with sound quality, and also ring lights. So, there is ways to create decent looking content from your home.
Hey, Ashley, we've had a couple of questions about expenses and how much you charge for a virtual event. And I think that was one of the first questions we got, and I feel like we've been ignoring it. And again, no, but I think right now we're at sort of a weird monetizing virtual events. I feel like this particular, if we want to call it a season, the next, I don't think we're going to see a lot of people willing to pay for a virtual event. I think it's going to be a little too new. I think we all haven't gotten used to it yet. I think it's going to be awkward. I still think we may be able to get sponsorship money to fund it, because I think there's still some interest in that. But I think it's going to be a little hard to get people, especially with the unknown of the economy and everything, to pay for those sessions, and also being fairly suspicious of how good the quality is going to be and what they're really going to get out of it. Now, that said, I don't think that philosophy applies to a year from now. I think a year from now, when we're all a little more familiar with this and it's become a little more of a common practice that this is how we're getting at least some of our information, that as an adjunct to a live event in particular, you will be able to charge for that. I think right now I look at this 5 months or 4 months as sort of a palliative period where we're just trying to get people. I don't want to lose touch with them. I mean, the most important thing is that they like us, that they know what we are doing, that they're aware and they're still fully committed to us, rather than I'm going to get enough income to pay for this thing. I think that's not the time we're in right now.
Yeah, I actually saw something really interesting. It was an event that was a live event, was canceled, turned to video, virtual. They refunded the money for people who had already registered, of course, but they made some of the content gated for those people who had registered. So they opened up the conference for a virtual event, but they still kept some behind the wall, kind of to reward people who had already signed up.
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions, Angel, was what's your philosophy on gated versus open content?
Yeah, I think it's really an opportunity. As Rich said, you definitely want to be able to be as open as you can, because this is such an uncertain time, especially if you've never done a virtual event before. But you can carve out for certain audiences or certain customers some gated content. Again, that they're not paying for. I think at this point, that's probably one step too far. But to create something that's exclusive for some audiences, that gives them that little extra bit of value that says they are valued.
And that actually ties into a bit about, we've been doing a lot of broadcasting over social channels, and Vinny's had a lot of experience with that. Yeah. And I mean, Vin, why don't you talk a little bit about the change in the quantity of people that we're seeing to those things, and it sort of ties into what's actually your strategy and your goal.
Yeah. So a lot of that, kind of depends on what type of event you have and what your objectives are. Many of our clients, even prior to this, when we were in more of a hybrid scenario, their goal was to get their content out to as many people as possible. And even with a fully virtual event, I think that there are still, if it's not so much of a lead gen, but more of a, get your content out there to make yourself kind of a thought leader in whatever space you're in. Using social channels is a perfect spot for that. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, even Instagram, and Twitch, to be honest with you, depending on the audience you're looking for. But your audience is already on those social channels. You don't have to go looking for them. So it's a great opportunity for you to reach your audience directly. LinkedIn, we're finding especially, has tremendous engagement, and people tend to watch longer and engage more on LinkedIn. So remember that as you're planning these events, don't be afraid to go onto the social channels. There's some even built-in networking tools there as well. So I find it to be one of the most exciting things that's happened in the live video on the web space in the last few years is the ability to stream live, very good quality video on all these social channels. And one more point to that is the use of private Facebook groups for more closed audience. We actually just completed an event back in March where it was an event for a medical company where we streamed onto a private Facebook group, and they had tremendous engagement, very successful. So those are all things to take into consideration.
Yeah,
those are networking. Oh, I'm sorry.
The private, for public events or broader events, the public Facebook and public LinkedIn is really something. I think in this case, we're reaching doctors. I mean, so easy to pick up your phone and right there, log into Facebook and it's there. And also a good way to keep contact with them over time, before the event, after the event, during the event. It's a good format. So definitely a thing you should consider if that's a possibility for you.
And then the content is available on demand instantly as well. So people can go back and watch it, and you can share it and share it again across channels. So, big fan of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, unfortunately right now, we could talk about this all day, I feel like, and I think we've had great conversations. I know we haven't been able to get to
Ashley, before we wrap it up, should we see if vote if you want us to keep going? No, well, let us text us and we'll keep going. We tend to only go for 30 minutes, but if someone wants to chat in that we should keep going, we'll keep going.
Oh, we have a keep going.
Okay.
All right, we'll keep going. So with that said, there's a question here about what's the typical timeline for a virtual event right now? If someone hasn't started planning it, what could they realistically be looking at for a launch date?
So, right now, spinning up a site or a platform doesn't take that long. That's a week or two. I think, again, it all depends on how much time, you got to develop a strategy. You got to develop content. Then the platform spin up is really not that big a deal. It's really the normal things that slow a meeting down are how to get it going before you, effectively, we call the platform a lot of times the ballroom. Before you get to the ballroom, that's where the time is. And so we can be ready to go, fairly quickly in a couple of weeks, but your content will suffer, I think your messaging, your strategy, all kind of suffers. So I think that's, a roundabout way of saying, hey, as little as 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, probably a better amount of time. And it's not as much on our end as it is on our client's end, I would say, to do it right.
I will jump in with one caveat there. I think that we're seeing in May and June now becoming very busy months. And believe it or not, there are some platform companies that some of our partners who are almost at capacity. So if you do have a May or June event, it's better to obviously, start doing that now rather than waiting, because we are seeing some capacities build up there. The other thing I'll say is some of what Rich said is platform dependent as well. Like if you're going full scale virtual, where you have many tracks of breakouts and networking lounges and, a little bit of development that needs to happen, then there is definitely a little bit more lead time. But if you're going live onto a social channel, the turnaround time could be as quickly as 10 days. So, it's a little bit of depending on what the event is.
I do just want to address, Brian has asked about our platform. Brian, just want to be clear. We're not a platform company. We work, I'm not going to say we're completely agnostic of platforms. We have ones that we favor because of their features and how we get into them. But there are a couple that we offer that will offer all the stuff you want, registration, integration with, Marketo or other marketing automation, select tracks, all sort of packaged in. Takes a little while to get it going, but it's not, they've come down quite a bit in price. Some of the alternatives are, and they do offer breakout sessions, Ask the Expert and all that in there. So we could get into that further if you want to reach out to someone. It's a good question, actually, Ashley. What do we have in them? If there's send us in maybe a private email. Send us your email address, and we'll have somebody reach out to you and explain more to you.
You can actually do it via theteam@cramer.com. Again, theteam@cramer.com. And you can also visit Cramer.com as well, and it'll have the resources there too to reach out to us. And I think another question that I've found across a lot of my different clients is, some of these are 3-4 day conferences. So how do they move over to a virtual platform, and would it be a full 3 days or they're shorter segments? Like how would that work?
Not 3 days. No. No, we're absolutely rethinking the time frames. They have to be much shorter. The reasons are quite obvious, because there is fatigue being on video for a long time. However, you can take that content and again spread it out. What you're doing for your virtual event, whether it's 3 hours one day, 3 hours the next day, whatever it might be, you can tease some of that content that goes on demand later on. You can have training offline. There are a lot of ways that you can take that content and use it in different channels and still get a lot of bang for your virtual event.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that. I mean, when you're structuring, if you're trying to take a full event and bring it online, I think you've got to consider the environment that people are watching in right now, obviously. So I like to keep sessions, an hour and a half long, and then provide other activities, which can be on-demand content, which I think is should be a big part of a big conference now, because I can't sit here for more than an hour and a half before I am starting to go crazy. But knowing that there's stuff available, and you have people making their kids dinner who can sort of join again later on at night, or they're doing stuff. So I like to think about it, like Angel said, spread it out so that the live chunks are more digestible. And then the on-demand stuff gives you sort of the depth that you really need to make it meaningful.
And I think it's important to just also consider the time that we're in. I think everybody is not only attention span, like Rich mentioned, but also we're all, at home with our families, our kids. Everybody is going through the same situation during this time period. So it is not only attention span wise, is it hard to sit for more than an hour? It's just not feasible to ask somebody to sit for more than an hour right now, given all the other stuff they have going on. So I think being considerate to the challenges that people are facing at home right now while you're producing this event is important as well. I think people will appreciate that.
Great. And I actually have a couple questions coming in about just higher ed and, hosting events for students and teachers and even commencements. So first someone asked, do we do that? And then what are some things that we recommend as far as workflow, platforms, all that kind of stuff?
I'm going to say that we haven't cracked this one yet. I mean, it's,
We have had some conversations about it, but believe it or not, Rich, there were a couple universities we spoke to who were kind of gung ho on the virtual commencement, and then actually got some pushback by their donors. So I think that's kind of the thing that, from the university side, you might face. No one wants to. It's a shame for, I think, some of the kids, if they have to have a virtual commencement. We definitely have to think about it, but hopefully things work themselves out where maybe in the fall we can do kind of a hybrid style. That's kind of the conversation we've been having, is trying to push.
I have had one idea that I haven't figured out how to execute yet, but was to basically more of a website solution where the everybody sort of made a little video, have their parents or their friends or whatever, and load it to like their little site within a website, so that you could look at everybody. You could look at everybody who was graduating with you, and there were little videos of them. That was the best I came up with, because I just can't imagine watching some dean read, 1,000 names without, just 1,000 names with a picture. I just can't see that as being compelling.
Yeah. You know what else we've had inquiries about is accepted students days, which I think that's more feasible for the virtual events, because people aren't as, commencement, you're very personally invested in seeing yourself there. Whereas with the accepted students, you're actually trying to get people together and having them interact with the university and with each other. So I think we'll have more success with that.
And I think too, in that way, Angel, a lot of success for universities have been on those social media platforms, because that's where everyone is going to engage in that age group, right? So, and I've seen a ton of success, and this might sound a little bit, but like with Instagram, with Instagram stories, going live with, maybe, I know your students are at home right now, but they could do live Q&As. You can create content with whatever you've already shot as far as campus tours, have a virtual tour with one of your tour guides. So there's so many opportunities that way as well. And I think as we are winding down here, I can't dismiss this one. It says, should clients expect to pay much less for virtual events than they did in in-person events, or is the cost more to create something virtual? And I will just say, as a producer who's very close to these budgets, I think, and I know this is not, a favorable one, but it truly depends. A lot more content is being created because you are creating video content that people are going to be engaging with. But there's so many different factors within that question. But I think for us, it really is about the platform that you end up choosing and just the production that goes into it. And that's why we're here to help. Let us know your budget, and then we can, help you navigate where you go from there.
I think the cost question too is I just, we've been trained over the years to have a certain expectation of the cost of something we see on our computers or on TV. I remember, all of you were too young, but we used to have like pay-per-view boxing. Like it was, what was the thing, and you were saying, and it was, there's a certain limitation, I think, for what people are really willing to pay. And it's going to be interesting as that plays out, because I think, I like to see that for the virtual events, that sponsorship is something that I think still can exist with enough income to fund most of a virtual event if we do it right. There's enough sponsorship opportunities. If you start to think of a virtual event as a broadcast, commercials, there's hundreds of different ways that you can get sponsorship in there that's meaningful. And so when possible, I tend to lean that way, make it very accessible to get to, try to lean on the sponsors to underwrite the cost. And again, everybody says that's a pipe dream, but maybe it is, but it seems like that's sort of the best way to sort of get there.
I think another way to kind of make it more cost effective is if you have some content that it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-time event, but you can maybe think about it more episodically and spread that content out over the course of a year, maybe, quarterly or once a month, in shorter packets. I think that you can get a little bit more return for your investment, where you're kind of staying in contact with your customers or your partners or whomever the target audience is over time, and not just like making that huge one-time investment for that one-time event. And remember this, I think where the surprise in cost is in the full virtual platforms. That's where I think a lot of people are kind of see some sticker shock. But that's why if you did kind of think about that episodic approach, where you're maybe doing 30-minute broadcasts, from a studio over the few times a year, it becomes more cost effective to do that.
Thanks, Vinny. And I think I'm going to have one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap up. This has been awesome. And I know that we are looking to do another live Q&A. So if we don't answer your questions here, feel free to contact us. Again, the team at Cramer.com, on Cramer.com, or ask us next time when we go live, and look out for more information there. So for everyone in this chat, I'm wondering, what are some of these long-term opportunities that you guys are excited about when talking about these hybrid events?
Well, I'll go first. Well, the subject of content marketing is, of course, near and dear to my heart. And I think that we're seeing virtual events are a perfect tempos for a long-term engagement with audiences. We've seen it for a long time. I think clients are seeing it as an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think this is going to be, I look at this as what, Netflix and Prime Video have brought to TV. Like, we've got an opportunity to change fundamentally the way we do things. And it's exciting.
I would echo what Rich said. I think, hopefully, hopefully when live events come back, people remember the learnings from this time period, and realize that it's always good to put your content online. Thinking ahead, thinking about those live events, remember that they're perfect opportunities to create that content. So remember the learnings that we're learning now, and apply them to those live events. I think that's what I'm most excited about, is seeing this grow as things start to come back.
Great. Thank you guys so much for your time today. And thank you, our audience, for taking your time to submit these questions and give your positive feedback on Cramer On Demand series and this live event as well. I know that we have had a blast making this content, and we're just so glad that we're able to help. Again, if we didn't cover your questions or you want to chat more, please feel free to contact us. Again, we love talking about this. Oh, and don't forget, I have to plug this, don't forget to tune in to episode 4 of the Cramer On Demand series, and that's coming at you this Thursday, April 16th. We're tackling audience acquisition and engagement. As always, guys, thanks for watching.